and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. I am your host Tyrant, where we take things from movies, TV shows, pop culture, try to create them in the real world and test them one-to-one from the media that they come from. Now in today's episode we're going to be taking a look at Sun Wukong Staff, or Ryu Jingu Bang, or Jingu Bang. That's really difficult to say, so I'm just going to call it Wukong Staff. Make it easier for everybody. Now, Wukong Staff is basically just a bow staff. It has magical properties, which obviously we can't replicate because we don't have magic, but we can create somewhat of a faithful replica to the one seen in the most recent game, Black Myth Wukong. I haven't gotten around to playing it. I heard it's really good. I still haven't played the Elden Ring DLC either, because I haven't had time. Anyway, yes, we're going to be trying to create one that's similar to the one from the Black Myth Wukong game, because I think it looks really cool. Now, I don't think there's going to be too much surprises in today's episode in terms of functionality, but it's just fun. I think this is going to be a fun episode, and this is a fun thing to do. So just very quickly, in the Black Myth Wukong game, the staff has lots of different configurations, enchantments, types, all that sort of stuff. What we're going to be going with is just the base, stock standard staff, basically the red handle with two brass and force multipliers, if you want to put them. That's what we're going to be trying to create and test in today's build. I've got a feeling it's going to turn out really cool, so I am looking forward to this one. Build process for Sun Wukong Staff is actually really simple because it's not too complicated. I'm going to use these brass fittings that look very similar to that in the game. These are actually from incense. Yeah, these are different incense burners. All I did was modify them to fit over the wood. I did put in some screws just to make sure that nothing actually comes loose or breaks during testing. So what I'm going to do after that is actually modify the surface of the wood on the staff so that the epoxy has something to really grab a hold of so that it won't come loose or break during testing. Then I'm going to mix up a whole bunch of epoxy to put on the brass ends. I also put in some brass pins so that even if the epoxy fails, hopefully they won't go anywhere because the pins should hold everything in place. Then after that, I'm just going to get some red paint to paint the handle of the staff itself to get it to look a little bit more closer to the game version. With all that out of the way, that's pretty much the build. Nothing too complex, but I think the results were quite effective. Let's get to the B-roll and then to the testing. Sun Wukong Staff is finished, and this thing feels... Well, first off, it's got some heft to it. It's also got a nice balance as well. I like how this feels. Not too heavy, but enough weight and heft that if you were to really swing this at somebody, man, you better be careful. So I think we've struck up a good balance between creating something that's very similar to the game that should be effective but also has a nice balance. Let's see if we can find you. There was a balance point somewhere in there. Okay, so how do I feel about it so far? Honestly, you've got that reach while at the same time having these force multipliers right on the end, but also you still have all the benefits of a staff. All right, why don't we start off trying to do, well, before we get into the moveset, let's just see what this thing is capable of. Let's see how much abuse this thing can take and dish out. So we'll start off with something simple, like some water bottles, nothing too crazy, especially for the hitting portion, because I don't think that's too important at this point. So we'll start off hitting a couple of things, then move up to Tony, and then maybe do some of the movesets and see how we go. Let's get started. Because this one has some points on the end, just a feature of this design, I'm very curious to see how this thing would act kind of a bit more like a spear, right? We do see him do that in the game. He'll bah, 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 bah. So let's do one of them before we get into a big strike. That actually works surprisingly well. All right, another. Let's see how the blunt force goes on this thing. Didn't pop it. Obviously, this is just blunt force. So right now we're just testing the structural rigidity of this thing. And honestly, that held up like a champ. Not bad. That sounded crazy though. So honestly, the staff so far kind of feels incredible. I really like it so far. Balance is good. It feels good in the hand. These brass ends, these metal ends feel really good in terms of hitting things, in terms of spinning with them. I'm enjoying this so far. So right now, I just want to see how it feels to hit something a little bit more solid, something like a human analog. So I've got Tony with me. So let's see how it feels to hit Tony, or a flesh analog, if you want to call it that. So when it came to actually hitting Tony and the bottles, it actually performed incredibly well. I really like the weight that you can generate with this thing. If you're enjoying today's episode, you should consider subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. Sorry, Tony, I didn't mean that one, buddy. So I tried to do some of the move sets there, as you may have noticed, and they kind of, some eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed that I kind of transitioned a little bit into some montante, into some greatsword stuff, some crowd control, but it just felt really good, and the weight distribution of it is actually really nice. So I did what I was comfortable with. I tried to do some of the moves from the game, but I also put my own little twist, my own little flair on it, I guess. I'm a little bit more comfortable with something like a greatsword than a bow staff, so that's what I kind of reverted to a little bit there. But I think with that, let's get to the outro. Let's get to Tyrant's initial thoughts score, or TITS for short. If that was censored, then YouTube doesn't like it. We might have to come up with a different name. But let's get to the outro, because I have a lot of thoughts to share on this one. I like this one. This one was good. Now, I do think that there's going to be some caveats here. I'm not sure how it's going to score. I'm not sure how it's going to score, but I think it'll do all right. But let's talk about it. Okay, so first off, this obviously isn't an exact replica from the game. However, funnily enough, I do think it's somewhat of a pretty close interpretation if you look at stuff like the movies, right? If you look at Sun Wukong, Journey to the West, some of the movies, Monkey King, this is pretty close. This is actually pretty close to what you see in the movies. And there's a reason why I think that actually helped today. But let's get to the score, to the TITS score. So, starting off with comfort. It was very comfortable. I really liked it, how it felt. It maneuvered well, it felt good in the hand, it felt good in the hit. It's like an 8, man. Like, it's good. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It felt like a bow staff, but obviously very well balanced. It felt like a weapon more than anything else, which I feel like is a very important caveat there, because when you pick up, like, let's say a stick or one of these bow staffs, they're very light. They're not really used for fighting purposes. This feels like a staff that is used to f people up. All right, so comfort, we're in about an 8. Next up, usability or wieldability. This is an interesting one, because I feel like there's a caveat here. This particular one that I made is very well balanced, very nice to use, but I feel like this is the upper limit of the wieldability spectrum. And the reason why I think that is because you have to balance these things. Like a weapon, think of like a weapon that has all these different stats, right? You're trying to balance out. This, I think, is on the upper end for weight. The weight helps because then it makes it more solid to hit things, but then it also can become a bit too much of a detriment if it's too heavy. Now, the one from the game I think would be too heavy. I think this one here is right on the line, a little bit heavier than this, and it would start to be more of a drawback than a positive having that weight, even in the hit. So right now, for usability, I'm in somewhere around it's like a 7.5 or 8. I liked this. This was good. I do think it was very wieldable, very usable. Next up, we have design. I mean, there's nothing really bad about the design. The design is actually kind of really good, actually. And the reason why, you have force multipliers on each end, you have a lot more reach with it. So there's not really any major drawback here other than a simple one. And the simple one of that is it's more of a blunt force weapon than anything else. Obviously, if you had a spear, the spear would kind of be more effective, or if you had a halberd or something like that. So the drawbacks for the design of this kind of is the weapon itself, not how the weapon is implemented. I feel like that's the caveat. For example, these pointy ends here are something that I added on with my design, which helped make it more deadly, made it more effective. But that's not on the original design. On the original design, it's just a flat top, which would make it less effective, obviously. So when it comes to the design, and this is going to roll into effectiveness, I think the design is like, all right, with design, for what it is, for how it works, I'm more than happy to give it a little bit of a higher number. So I'm going to give it, let's say, a 7. I'm going to give it a 7 for design. But the caveat for that is in the next category, which is effectiveness. The effectiveness of this is reasonable. However, a lot of the drawbacks of this weapon are not present in other weapons that are, let's say, staffs or pole arms or things like that. This is kind of, it could kill you, it could be lethal to a certain degree, but it's a lot more blunt force trauma than, you know, instant kills, right? So this would require a couple more blows than, let's say, something like a spear or a halberd. Now, I know somebody's going to comment inevitably, what if they hit you in the head and they killed you instantly? We're talking on average. Yeah, so when it comes to this sort of thing, its effectiveness is actually not as high as you would think. I would say it's probably around about a 5 or 6, which is respectable. That isn't terrible, but you got to remember this class of weapon, which is basically a staff, a pole arm, this is on the lower end of effectiveness compared to other variants, especially if you have something like a glaive or you have a blade on this sort of thing, then you're getting into different territory. Now, I should caveat that, like I did at the start of the episode, in the game there are different ones and there are some bladed versions. We're just talking about the one from the, you know, the story, what have you, which is more of this sort of configuration. But that is our final ratings. So for the final score out of 40, we got 29, which isn't terrible. It is, you know, over the halfway point. I think this is a fun weapon. This is a good one. This one isn't, how did I put this? This one, if I was getting into training and you're training bow staffs or something like that, this is really cool. Just before we finish out with today's episode, I wanted to let you guys know that channel memberships are now available. If you want to support this channel and the content that I make, you now can. Down below near the subscribe button, there is a join button, and there'll also be a link in the pinned comment. It would really help out the channel. These builds are actually kind of really expensive to make and then to travel out here and to test. The costs add up quite a lot. And the crazy thing is I actually haven't made a profit off any of my YouTube content at all yet. So it's getting to the point where I've got some bigger projects upcoming, and I wanted to let you guys know that I've opened channel memberships for the purpose of trying to get the channel basically up and running a little bit better, so that I'm able to provide a lot more content and I'm able to do these sorts of builds, because the costs can add up quite a lot. I'll probably talk about this in like a little announcement when I announce the members properly. So if you enjoy the content and you want to help support the channel, you now can. There's a way for you to do that. I would really appreciate it. I also wanted to take this moment to say thank you to everybody who's actually subscribed, liked, watched, commented over the last, 8 months since I started the channel. It's been incredible. You guys have been awesome. I've been very thankful for how the channel has actually gone. You would think that that would translate into being able to, have the money to do these sorts of builds, but it's crazy. But I just wanted to say thank you, not only for you guys watching, subscribing, and if you become a supporter, I would also really appreciate that too. That's it. Sun Wukong's Staff. I enjoyed this one. Haven't played the game yet. I hear it's good. Maybe one day. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.